We are so back. Well, at least I am. Happy Friday, friends. Back in the proverbial saddle. Although this is kind of the chair I'm sitting in is not the most comfortable thing, so I refer to it as a saddle. Near and dear to my butt, or something like that. Anyways, was off, went to Banff, went to Glacier National Park. All amazing. Highly recommended if you get the chance to go to either place to do those things. Like it was nice to just get away. Just get away. But hopefully you had a good July. Now it's into August and things are starting to head into that holiday shopping season. We have a lot to talk about. And so let's just dive into the tech news. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. Here we go. So Microsoft's extended support licenses, if you want to call them that, or whatever you want to call it, for Windows 10 are actually a little bit more generous than I was even thinking myself. The folks over at Windows Central found out that, hey, if you have one, you can use it on up to 10 devices. So it's attached to your Microsoft account, so you don't have to pay like oodles and noodles of dollar dues, if you will, to keep all your Windows 10 devices updated. So that's actually a relatively good thing. And even more specifically, you can now see how much it's going to cost you. So it's $30. Or if you have just Microsoft reward points, which probably most people listening to this do, you can just use those. And so it's 1,000 points, and that makes it super easy. Nice, clean interface, it looks like, for those of you on the video side. And so there you go. Like that actually is un-Microsoft, like where it's relatively consumer friendly at the end of the day. Other things happening here, Microsoft has started publishing videos of what they call Windows 2030 Vision. And it's massively like hand wavy. And the first one focused sort of more on security side and like, you're not going to use a keyboard and mouse. You're going to talk to your computer. And this is like the same thing we've heard probably since the early 90s, whenever the first microphones really started to become pervasive across endpoints. So I don't know. I mean, it's visionary at the end of the day. Although 2030 is only 5 years away, and I can't see myself giving up my mechanical keys in 5 years or less. I mean, this was what Cortana was supposed to do initially, but maybe now it feels more real. I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, things that are related to the sort of vision are ChatGPT 5 was announced this week, and it is absolutely worth calling out that they had some of the worst charts. They made, I think ChatGPT 5 was trained on Apple's horrific like M1 performance charts, if you remember those. I mean, these things are horrific. Like, look, the 69.1 and 30.8 have the exact same height. Like these charts are comically bad. Like horrific. Like, who looked at these, and did ChatGPT 5 make them? Because this is going to become a meme for every single ChatGPT launch. It's like, let's look at their charts because they are pretty bad. Now, ChatGPT 5 is available on basically everything, including Copilot, which is wonderful because usually there's like that weird lag that happens, but you can use it with Copilot. I have been trying to use it, so I am a big fan of Cursor, and in Cursor, they're giving like a ChatGPT 5 free week or whatever it is. And so I started a project from scratch trying to use WinUI 3, and it's going poorly. is the only, I don't know if I tried to ask too much. There were some big lofty promises on stage, and right now I'm still more a fan of Sonnet 4 specifically, than I am ChatGPT 5. We'll see if we get there, but right now it's a lot of like head mashing and everything else, and I might just scrap the project and start over and not use WinUI 3. Be like, hey, build me a WPF app or something that's a little bit more basic, I guess. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, it is out. It's available. You can start trying it. Like, we're in a diminishing return area, right? It's not that these things are necessarily bad, but it's just the jumps that we're seeing are compressing with each model release. So there you go. You can go hang out and check out with that. Here's a really interesting one from our friend Raymond Chen, who has been around Microsoft forever. So if you don't recognize that name, go read up on him. Remember how they used to like name things like Fall Creators Update, Spring Update? And so he wrote a blog post. It's very obvious, but it dictates why they stopped using those names and they went to 25H2 and 25H1. And it's because they realized they had people who live in the southern hemisphere and spring and fall don't make sense. That is the TLDR of this post, but it was a Microsoft employee who like raised their hand and said, why are we calling it a fall update? If you live in Brazil, fall in the northern hemisphere is not the same as fall in the southern, and so it doesn't make sense. And so that is why they stopped doing that. So there you go. Speaking of WinUI, by the way, Microsoft is going to slowly start open sourcing it. Now, it's going to take a while because WinUI has deep roots into Windows, and parts of the code base touch proprietary layers that can't be published. And so they've got to like work through all those details. But I'll tell you the gut reaction from this. They're not open sourcing it because they're like so proud of everything. It's got such great momentum and everything else. I think they're open sourcing it like, hey, can other people just work on this stuff? And because we don't think it's a priority anymore. That's kind of my interpretation, which isn't always exactly, if you know what I mean. So on to the gaming news, because there were some big headlines from both Microsoft and Sony this week. So Xbox has canceled Contraband. So this is a game that was announced in 2021 from Avalanche Studios. And after 4 years of basically not hearing anything, it sounds like it's official. And then I think Jason skeeted it out, whatever blue skying is. And then it became official that they're like, yeah, we're not working on that anymore. And so that game was never going to ship. And yeah, that's another one of those casualties of the times, if you will. And speaking of other casualties, so Forza, after some serious radio silence, because they had been pretty active on social media, finally put out a blog post and some things like, hey, what's the future of Forza after the studio got decimated by the layoffs? And as Clobrill points out here, they did announce things are still coming, but however, it's more of like just re-enabling things that were already there, and it doesn't sound like it's a new development. I'm not saying there's never going to be a next generation Forza Motorsport, but it sounds like they're much more in maintenance mode, if you will, rather than like active development mode, kicking out new things out the door all the time. It seems like they got it over to PlayStation, and then they're like, okay, we're just going to let this marinate for a long time, I'm guessing. Is sort of the assumption. We'll see if they have anything else, but insiders and outsiders and just obvious observers are realizing like, yeah, Forza Motorsport doesn't seem like it's going to be getting the love like it had been for the past 3 years now that so many people are gone from the studio. On the PlayStation side, things are changing, right? Sony had a good quarter, by all means. They sold 2.5 million PlayStation 5 consoles. They're up to, I believe, about 80.3. But in their earnings in press releases, they really talked about how they're shifting more towards monthly active users than console sales. Now, somebody will point out that, hey, they've said this before, I believe it was like 2018 or 2017, where late in the console cycle, they stopped worrying about consoles being sold and trying to really promote those monthly active users. However, there's a big, and I mean big difference between now and like the end of the PlayStation 4 life cycle, if you will. It's that Sony is starting to put more titles over onto Xbox, and I think it's not hard to stretch here and say like this is sort of them saying like, look, we expect more titles, especially our live service titles, to land over on competing platforms. They didn't say Xbox specifically, but we already know that they've had good success on the PC, and they're going to try it with Helldivers 2, and we can all assume here that if that goes well, and maybe it already is, then they're going to bring other additional titles over to the Xbox platform. It's not that do not interpret this as Sony's giving up on consoles, that Sony is following Microsoft step per step. However, changing of the metrics about how they judge success is a very big deal. I say it every time there's earnings, as Microsoft says, judges on our content and services revenue, not on our consoles and hardware sales. And that seems to be the model that Sony is going. And if that truly is, then they feel like there's likely more growth ahead, at least during this end of this generation, by focusing on bringing titles to more platforms rather than trying to keep exclusives and hawking console sales at the end of the day. So, yeah, just something to keep an eye on. And Sony's perfectly healthy. Xbox is obviously doing just fine, or Microsoft is doing just fine. So, nothing to really be too wound up about, if you will. So, on to my favorite part of the week, which is always the questions. And I think, did I remember to bring them up? I'm close. I've got them almost all up here on the screen. Sometimes I forget to do that. So anyways, just 4 questions into the hopper because it's Friday and I forgot to post it until like halfway through the day. Anyways, Midnight Blue Wolf says, do you think there will be a cheap option for the next Xbox console similar to the Series S, or will casual gamers be priced out of the Xbox ecosystem? It would be a disservice to Microsoft to not have a lower priced option, and it might be the only option. We don't really know. There's if Microsoft executes the strategy we think they're going to do, where Xbox is more... Remember, Xbox on PC is like something Microsoft is actively promoting now. So if Microsoft is doing that, we would expect that third parties might build a lower cost Xbox console, if you will. Microsoft cannot price out everybody from the market, right? Yes, there's those people like myself. If there's a $900 Xbox console, I would probably buy it as long as the performance is there and it justifies the expenditure. But most people are looking towards the lower priced options. And we got to use like lower priced here in quotes, because what is a lower priced console option for the next generation? If we are expecting things to like $700-800 or maybe even higher, then a low price console might be like $500. Like look at the Switch 2 and its pricing model. So I do not expect that there's going to be a $300, like $250, $300 Xbox Series low end next generation. I would expect that the lower end is going to be like around that Switch 2 price point, which if it is it really low end? I mean, the price is definitely more medium to inflated. So yeah. Gutty says, hello, Brad. Do you think Windows 12 is the next Xbox? What impact will this have on the Xbox brand and the gaming market? So I don't think so. I don't think so for a couple reasons. One, Windows and Xbox are both very powerful brands, very powerful, very well known, very well understood. By like smashing them together, Xbox doesn't gain enough from that. In fact, it probably loses something, because people think of Windows, they don't just think of gaming. They think of Excel, they think of Paint, they think of Photoshop. And so Xbox is like a gaming brand. I don't think that they would dilute their own portfolio by trying to merge that branding. That's why it's Xbox on PC. It's not even Xbox on Windows. It's Xbox on PC, which is a very deliberate thing because they're keeping that Windows separated from the Xbox brand, at least for now. So, yep, we'll see. We will see, though. I don't think that these things are they might launch like Xbox on PC and Windows 12 might be a thing that could come out together, but they are not going to be the same thing, if that makes sense. Danny says, do you think we'll ever see a version of Windows optimized for just gaming? Yeah, we already have one. It's called Xbox. People don't realize that Xbox is just a version of Windows running games. That's what it is. That is literally what it is. Now, what people most likely think is like, I'm going to go to Staples, Best Buy, or wherever and be like, I'm going to buy Windows for games or something like that. Windows for gamers, and like have a specific version. No, I think if anything, we would see Windows for AI, but that dilutes the expression even more. So it's just going to be Windows. It is sort of, I don't foresee that happening. Also, there was Windows Live for games, which was, I think, Vista era, and so it didn't pan out long term either. It wasn't a specific. That was more of a marketplace sort of thing. It wasn't a specific. Was it a specific gamer SKU? I don't think it was. And Eags says, Xbox seems to be canceling games left and right. Besides the games we know will be released in the next 6 to 12 months, what do you think the longer term looks like for Xbox publishing? They announced they have nearly 40 games in development. So I don't know if that included Contraband. I'm going to assume that it probably did not. So that's a lot of games. And you could figure if they're doing 5 games a year, that's like 6 years of roadmap. So 5 games a year is a lot, by the way. So something along those lines may not be too far from the truth. I think Microsoft is they're going to be taking less risks. For a while, Phil Spencer was like, we're just trying to give studios the creative freedom they want to deliver great quality titles and all that, which was absolutely true. But then it realized hey, some of these titles just aren't generating the returns that we need, so there's probably more pressure from the top to create titles that are going to be broadly appealable, if that makes sense, rather than niche indie games, unless the budget aligns to the expectation. So just keep that in mind. I think Xbox will continue to publish games for a very long time. That is their bread and butter these days, and that's where the margin is, and so I'm not too concerned about that. I just think that Microsoft is no longer an open checkbook for studios to just build games willy-nilly. Like, they have to hit their deadlines, they have to ship on time, and they can't be a Redfall. And so I think that's realistically the future for a lot of this stuff. So there you go, guys. A little bit shorter of a week here. Not it's every day, every week is 7 days, but if you will. But it's August, right? Back to school is coming. A lot of people are off at Microsoft. August is always a slow month. It starts to ramp up in September. It really kicks into gear in October and November, and then December is the holiday season, coming to a conclusion. So times are going to get more interesting here in the future. Hope all of you had a wonderful week, and as always, make sure to keep it subscribed here because only BS on this podcast is me.